Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Wednesday, January 10th, and it's day 96. I hope you can hear me okay. I'm on the road, but I wanted to be sure to give an update. So 96 days since October 7th. I wanted to give a readout of Secretary Blinken's time. He's been in the Middle East. He's been having meetings in Israel. And so I wanted to give a readout. This is from the U.S. State Department's press release. This is his fourth trip to Israel. He was there on the 95th day. Today's 96. So this is from yesterday. He met with families of hostages that are still held by Hamas in Gaza. He also met with hostages who've been released. Apparently, he's met with them on previous trips. And so he's getting to know many of those families. And in this readout, he talks about how time kind of stands still and is different for people who've experienced trauma. He was talking about that for people in Israel who have suffered and lost loved ones, for people who still are waiting for their family to come home from Gaza. But he also was talking about that for Palestinian families in Gaza as well. He said hundreds of thousands of people are experiencing acute food insecurity. He said, for the mother and father trying to find something to feed a hungry child, the passage of another day without food is excruciating. He said, time feels different for Israelis and Palestinians whose loved ones have been killed. For them, time often falls into before or after. The after is filled with a loss that most of us will never know and cannot fully imagine. I'll talk more and give a little bit of an analysis about some of the things he said, but one of the main points while he was talking about the shared suffering of both Israelis and Palestinians was reassuring that the United States continues to stand with Israel and ensuring that what happened on October 7th and the horrors of the Hamas attacks would never happen again. Blinken articulated goals of his trip, the intense focus on bringing the remaining hostages home, addressing the humanitarian crisis and strengthening protections of civilians in Gaza and preventing the conflict from spreading. Particularly right now, the hot spots are the Red Sea with the Houthi attacks, but also the northern border of Israel with Hezbollah. Blinken said, we believe the submission against Israel to ICJ, this is the South African submission I've been talking about, and the claims that Israel is committing genocide. Blinken said that that submission distracts the world from all of these important efforts. And moreover, the charge of genocide is meritless. It's particularly galling. These are Blinken's words, given that those who are attacking Israel, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, as well as their supporter Iran, continue to openly call for the annihilation of Israel and the mass murder of Jews. I wish that well, I'll just tell you what he says, and then I'll give you some thoughts. He continued to talk about the perspective of Middle East leaders, the daily toll on civilians in Gaza, particularly on children. He said it's far too high. He talked about important progress being made about aid getting into Gaza, including the opening of the Kerem Shalom crossing. And he emphasized the need for more aid to get into Gaza without, and here's where my analysis is. All of this is like he's saying the right thing, but the United States has so much influence and so much power. And so he's talking about getting aid into Gaza without talking about the fact that Israel turning off the water and limiting aid is what's causing the needs in the first place. And Israel's indiscriminate bombing that is killing thousands of people is what is causing this death and destruction. And so while Hamas should be held accountable for the crimes of October 7th, Israel should be accountable for the deaths and the horrors that they are perpetuating in Gaza as well. And so this speech was so frustrating as I was reading through it. He discussed that Israel is transitioning to another phase in the military campaign. And he said, we believe that Israel has achieved significant progress towards this fundamental objective. He was speaking of protecting civilians. And I just want to say, Secretary Blinken, what in the world are you talking about? In the past 24 hours, more than 100 people were killed in Gaza. How is Israel's campaign looking any differently? It looks different because more soldiers have been removed. But I'll talk in a minute about OSHA and UNRWA and the way that the bombing has continued and the humanitarian crisis continues to worsen, not get better, even though good for us. We got a little bit of aid into Gaza. That's what I feel like, the United States wants accolades for progress being made without holding any accountability. So he talked about Israel's campaign in northern Gaza becoming lower intensity. The Israeli Defense Forces is scaling down their forces there. The need to plan for the United Nations to carry out assessment missions. He talked about displaced Palestinians being able to return home safely, but that this is going to take time. It won't happen overnight. He talked about security, infrastructure, and humanitarian challenges. When you look at what remains in northern Gaza, what is there for anyone to return home to in terms of jobs, in terms of sustainability, in terms of agriculture, in terms of homes, in terms of water, in terms of infrastructure? I mean, we could go on and on. Blinken said that the United States unequivocally rejects any proposals advocating for the resettlements of Palestinians outside of Gaza. He said that he was reassured by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that is not the policy of Israel's government. We do know that Smotrich and Ben-Gvir and others in the government disagree with Netanyahu over that issue, but it's good that the U.S. Rejects the resettlement of Palestinians. We are in alignment on that. He also discussed escalations with Hezbollah and the goal of, preventing escalations, trying to establish a more durable peace and security, and the goal of a pathway to a Palestinian state. There were questions by media, and one of the dynamics is that the Israeli government is continuing to refuse to transfer the Palestinian tax money that has been collected. The finance minister, Smotrich, said yesterday that there are 2 million Nazis in Gaza, and I won't give money to Nazis, just like the US won't give money to Al-Qaeda. Asked about this, Blinken responded and essentially said the PA should have their money. He said they should have them. They should have it in order to be able to pay their people who provide essential services, the security forces. But again, yes, they should have their tax money, but what's the US going to do, or how's there going to be accountability? And why do we continue to unilaterally support and send more weapons and without there being accountability? So that is a bit of a summary of Blinken's visit. A few updates from Reuters, Hezbollah and the northern border of Israel. There was a drone attack where Hezbollah says that they were responding to assassinations, and that's why things have escalated at the border there. 3 Hezbollah fighters were killed just in the past day or so. The Hezbollah deputy leader said that their group does not want a wider war. And U.S. peacekeepers said that deeper strikes between Hezbollah and the escalations at the northern border are a worrying trend. Hundreds attended a funeral of the Hezbollah commander that was killed on Monday. The Hezbollah deputy leader, Naim Qassem, in a televised speech, said his group did not want to expand the war from Lebanon, but if Israel expands it, the response is inevitable to the maximum extent required to deter Israel. There also is a debate going on between Egypt and Israel about the buffer zone. I think it's called the Philadelphia corridor. It is. Israel controlled that up until, I think, 2005. It was a 13-kilometer, 8-mile border, or Egypt shares the border with Gaza, and it's the only border of the Palestinian coastal enclave that's not directly controlled by Israel. And Egypt had proposed or had rejected the proposal for Israel to provide greater oversight over that buffer zone on the Egypt-Gaza border. But an Israeli source said they weren't aware of that. Several Egyptian sources said that Egypt had rejected that proposal. So that has been in the news. And then the Red Sea conflict continues. In the past day, the US and UK forces shot down 21 drones and missiles fired by Houthis in the Red Sea on Tuesday. OSHA reports, I wanted to end with this because I think it's really important for us to understand when we hear that things are shifting, the reality on the ground in Gaza is not. According to OSHA, January 9th, intense Israeli bombardments from air, land, and sea continue, particularly in Khan Yunis and Deir al-Balah. Khan Yunis governorate, remember that South Gaza, that's where all the displaced people, or the majority of displaced people, are residing. This has resulted in killing and injury of many people. It's had devastating consequences for tens of thousands of civilians. Between the 8th and 9th of January, 126 Palestinians were killed and 241 were injured, bringing the death toll to more than 23,000 people. So I could go on, but that gives you a bit of a summary of where things are. And I'll continue to report while I'm on the road. Do join us in Washington, D.C. or online for the Day of Action on Saturday.